Welcome back, everybody. And today's story is another plane crash story again. Now, stop making plane crash stories. I'll make a playlist about one so that you can check off them out. But anyways, on to this video. So, plane crashes. Yep, you have heard of them already in the two previous episodes, and if you didn't, check them out. But today's plane crash is very special. It's an explosion. Now, it happened a long time ago in 1996, but well, it's still disastrous and one of the most dangerous plane crash explosions that happened inside the United States. And moreover, this plane crash is very special because it's not just plunging into the sea, it's not just crashing to a plane, it's not just crashing on land or because of a malfunction. It's a different story and it's a very interesting story. So this is why I want to share with you the story of Flight TWA or Trans World Airlines 800. Trans World Airlines 800 is a very big passenger plane. It had about 230 people on board, 14 crew on board as well. There are also 4 crew members that control the plane. First captain is is a very old captain. Second, and the other captain is also very old. They both had a lot of training experience with TWA. TWA is a very big company. I mean control center. So whatever you call it, a control center. They have a very big control center with a lot of TWA airlines. Both two captains were very skilled in controlling TWA airlines, and they had a lot of flight time experience. The third officer, the engineer, was basically starting from a month ago. That's why he has company by another engineer, which sits behind the flight crew, and so he is 62 years old, and that is old, and yeah, that is old. So he is very trained as well, and that's why he is there to help the engineer. So off of the flight. The flight went on smoothly with nothing to worry about. Now you may be wondering, how can 4 flight crew that are very trained, skilled, and can fly a plane like Trans World 800 and they can just crash into the sea? How can they do that? Do they just, a malfunction, I don't care? They don't just do that. They have a skill experience. Well, this is another story. This is not just a malfunction. This is a big story, an explosive one. So first of all, imagine you're on a plane that is very big. I know, planes usually are very big with like 230 passengers and crew. But off to say, the passengers are just lying on here. But there's a secret. Planes are like this. They're not like this. They're not squares, rectangles that just, float in the air. So there's a secret about planes that I didn't know about until recently when I was researching about a TWA 800. It's that the passengers are here and just sitting, and under there's also another surface. There's fuel tanks and other stuff that controls the planes. So let's focus on fuel tanks the most. Fuel tanks are very important because, they keep care about the plane, because planes go by fuel and they can power up planes by fuel, and the planes will run the engine smoothly. They have some wires connected. There's also some wires of electricity and all the stuff there. The mechanical stuff. So The radio center was contacting with the plane, its messages. So it's a very busy airspace, but we still have some recordings. They're not public, but I also heard a few of them, which are very, very special. Well, they're not that special. They only have the messages of the plane, but they also have the last messages of TWA 800 of the captain. So, first of all, TWA 800 replied that the the air of the plane was on top of around 11,000 feet, and so they said to go to 13,000 for temporarily, and TWA said got it and just flew off. And a while later, it said the flight and how tall is the flight from the ground again, which about the feet and how much feet it's tall and how temporarily should the feet should be. So as the TWA 800 was contacting, it finally said its last message, ground, and then 15,000 feet above the air, and it just said its last message of contacting to the radio center, and that's it. So it just flew off, and bye-bye. Meanwhile, in the underbelly of the plane, several things were happening, and several disastrous things. First of all, fuel tanks. There are fuel tanks that are filled off. So the fuel tanks are being used. There's also some empty fuel tanks, but one fuel tank was still filled. Actually, it wasn't, but it was only filled with a small amount of fuel, like a puddle. And it's like a big fuel tank, and then there's only a puddle. It was about like 300 liters of fuel and oil in it. And there's also wires running in the fuel tank. And that combined. So the plane and the people around that saw the plane crashing thought and found the theory that maybe the air conditioner warmed up the fuel, because air conditioners need to release the hot air to make more cool air. So the warm air was transported down in the underbelly, which vaporized the fuel, and the fuel started to create smoke. It started to bubble, and then it started to get hot, real hot in the fuel tank. It was starting to harm the surface of the underbelly of the TWA 800 aircraft. The Boeing 747 was flying normally, and the engineer says, "Look at that fuel, looking sus." Okay, I'm just joking. They didn't say that, but the fuel tanks were going crazy. The fuel tanks were like on number 4. They just said, fuel tank number 4, the overflow of the fuel is going crazy. Why is that? And they just ignored it. So meanwhile, the vaporized fuel decides to burn and bubble and starts to vaporize on the underbelly. Well, at that time, TWA was still a normal, and they didn't have any radio contact. They were just, we're still flying. So, they were still flying normally. And as they were flying, there's also some electric wires inside the fuel tank. On the underbelly of the plane, there is some mechanical stuff there. And, the wires could literally break down. And TWA 800's wires were already worn out because it was old, and nobody checked the underbelly of the plane. So it was worn out, some were broken, and some were even naked, and they also revealed themselves, leaving the electrical charge. Some of them even had little sparks that could actually harm and damage the plane. And remember, some of the electrical the worn out electrical wires were worn out inside the fuel tank that was vaporizing with fuel. So, as the fuel that was vaporizing, somebody theoried that maybe two electric wires got worn out and they touched each other. And then they made a huge electric spark, which made the other electric sparks go on, and then it burst, and the vaporizing fuel started to burn because, well, the electricity from the wire just, and the vaporizing fuel just and turns into fire. Electricity plus vaporizing fuel is fire. So we all learned the three types of things that start a fire in science, right? Oxygen, which is air; fuel, which they got it, fuel, oxygen, and a burning point. So a burning point, they did have it, which was the electrical wire, and boom, that releases a fire. And the fire started to spread around the fuel tanks, which started to damage, and they started collapsing, which harmed the underbelly, and the underbelly started to form a few cracks. Meanwhile, the passengers were like, la la la, and then the underbelly just like, and the burst flames just burst out. Imagine you were just like sleeping and napping or anything on a plane, and then on the underbelly there was fire, and you just like, whoa, I burst out, and then you just hit the ground and you die. And that was exactly the case of 2WA800. The fire spread around and eventually spread into the surface of the passengers. The passengers screamed and panicked for life, and soon they perished. And as that, it spread to the cabin because where the fire located was near the cabin and the nose of the plane. So the nose of the plane, this is the plane size. This part of the plane broke down. This part of the plane, so the plane was this size. Wait, actually, this size, for example, so you can see. And so this part of the plane, the nose part, just broke off and flew away, and then got burned into flames and spinned around for a while, breaking the nose, and everybody died for a few seconds, and everybody was like, God, please save me, and then they just crashed into the ocean. Everybody drowned and died, sadly. So here's the surprising thing. The rest of the part of the plane kept flying because the fuel tanks were still working, the engine was still working, and the motors were still working, and then until the plane ran out of fuel because the fire was too much and it was too high in the air that it dropped down. Everybody suffocated, and then everybody said, whoa bro, chill, and then they just died. They perished and they landed in the ocean, never to be seen again. They crashed into the ocean, and so did the plane. Meanwhile, the radio center was like, oh hey, TW... Wait, where's TWA800? I don't see him in my radar. And they're just like, hey, TWA800. Nothing. Hey, TWA800. Nothing. And so they contacted the other airlines. And the other airlines was like, I just saw an explosion like 10 feet ago. What the? And, well, the radio center was like, how could that happen? And then another airline was like, I just saw an explosion like 5-6 feet ago. And then the radio centers were like, how did that happen? And then all the airlines just reported explosions of TWA800. And finally, the control center asked TWA800 what happened. And they responded nothing. Because when the first airline talked, the crash happened. And so the plane was flying up and it destroyed everything. And so, nothing. TWA800? Nothing. I think that was him, the control center said. And the planes were like, God bless him. And so it just So they knew nothing about that airline. Like everybody was like, it's fake. No, TWA will land here. It's just a mystery. But it did crash, and some theories and reports had specific evidence to back up their claims about TWA 800. So TWA 800 was a very special airline. TWA 800 just crashed into the ocean. But not just any ocean. It broke apart first. And because of that flame, if people just repaired the wires, that would have never happened. And if people just have removed the fuel from the fuel tank and have been a little careful, that would have never happened. Even just removing one of these consequences, like the air conditioner, and maybe just leave it on a lower temperature, or maybe to leave the fuel out, or maybe to repair the wires, would just stop the incident from happening. Like that was actually very, very sad. And I know it was one of the deadliest plane crashes in USA. And remember, it happened a long time ago, inside 1996, but 230 people, 230 innocent people perished away. I feel very sorry for this airline, and it's not just any other airline like Delta 1141. Like, oh hey, like the crew wasn't even noticing, and the plane crashed. Like, I don't feel sorry that much. Okay, fine, I do feel sorry, but what if the plane would have been just a little careful? But TWA 800 was not that case. It was a case of real situations and scenarios. It wasn't the cause of the people, but it was the cause of the plane itself. While was the fuel tank filled with a puddle of 300 liters of fuel? I have no idea. So there you go. The story of flight TWA 800. As a kid, I've heard of TWA 800 one time before, like several times before. I was like, how did that plane crash happen? That's so scary. Look. And then I was like amazed of the plane crash. And I ignored it. But today I got back with it. I researched and I found evidence, and I found things to back up and reasons why this crash happened, why these innocent people died. So, thank you for listening, and stay tuned for the next video.